Welcome to the Brown County Hour.
Coming to you from the legendary hills of Brown,
where the plum purple haze,
the one nature herself drapes over the hills and hollers,
inspires local characters, artists, and nature lovers.
It's as though the hills themselves conspire to create a beauty and culture in the heart of Indiana.
Sit for a spell and hear the music.
Tall tales,
true stories,
and current goings-on.
Brought to you by folks who still know how to sit by a fire in winter
and swim buck naked in summer. Welcome to episode 72 of the Brown County Hour. This is Dave Seastrom.
And Carrie Ray, along with the rest of the crew. This month, our musical guest is Frank Jones. We'll listen to his interview and hear some selections from his new CD, Lined In Sycamore.
Bill Miller will share some of his reflections about the early days in the Peace Corps. Jeff Tryon will offer his perspective on the drug epidemic. And Jim Eagleman shares his thoughts of spring seeds.
Judy Olds talks about homeless teens in Brown County. And as luck would have it, Chuck Wills has a This Old Guitar Story in common with Reverend Josh Peyton. Dave Seastrom will talk about a little off-road adventure.
We begin our first segment with our interview with Frank Jones. Bill Miller shares his reflections on being in Southeast Asia during the early days of the Peace Corps, and we'll close with the Frank Jones tune, Lined in Sycamore.
My pleasure to introduce Frank Jones, who is in our studio tonight to talk about his brand new CD. Frank, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So let's talk about your new CD. How long did it take to produce this?
It's been a labor of love and angst and turmoil and elation for about 15 or 16 months. Doug Harden and I put it together at his 7th String Studios. And it's 11 songs that span several years. Some of them were written a long time ago, and some of them are recently written.
If I understand this correctly, didn't your brother write some of these songs?
Yeah. There's one on there, it's called Perfect Lady, that he wrote lyrics to and just gave them to me and said, do something with this. And I went, oh, sure, boom, and I grabbed it and I was moving to Lafayette at that time. I joined a rock and roll band up there when I was a teenager and ran away from home. It's the equivalent to me following the circus.
Okay.
So,
better option than the French Foreign Legion.
Oh, boy, yeah. Didn't have to travel as far.
Yeah.
West Lafayette was a lot more fun. And I immediately went to work on it because I had a lot of time on my hands and put that song together really quick, and I've been playing it for a couple decades now.
Well, and that's particularly poignant because you just recently lost your brother.
That's true. Coming up February 17th would have been his 64th birthday, and he passed away last March 28th. And it was, of course, quite a shock for everybody. It was an end of an era for me because he and I were writing partners, did a lot of stuff up until the day he passed away. He was at my house that afternoon, and we drew from each other and worked real well.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
The next CD actually is coming up, is going to be Dickie Jones songs, and it's I've already got it set up. We've had one meeting on it already as far as getting stuff together to actually make it come to fruition. That I think there's probably 8 or 9 songs going to be on it. Going to kind of keep to the tradition of Dickie and, some of the classics, Barstool Blues and Brown County Vacation and
right,
some of the really good ones. I hope to drag Barry and some of those guys in, Barry Elkins, and some of those guys that have played a lot of Dickie's music over the years. Yeah. It's going to be a good project, I think. So.
Well, we're looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So there's 11 songs on this particular CD.
On Lined In Sycamore, yeah.
And what was the name of it?
Lined In Sycamore.
What's the nature of the music? Is it acoustic?
It's
or
acoustic,
rock, or
and basically what I've done is I have this band in my head that I can bring out when I want, and that's the beauty of working with Doug Harden. I can say, Doug, this is what I'm thinking, and we walk through it together, and it's really, it kind of unfolds real easy for me in that particular situation. But it came to me driving down Upper Salt Creek, just after you go past Petro Road and it goes down into the bottom, and there's always scads of turkeys off to the right and Gaither's Farms all the way up at the end, and it's just a big open field, and it's just wrapped in these sycamore trees that just follow the creek and, that just walk around it. And I've always loved that. It's like, man, this is just the coolest thing. I love how these sycamore trees, behave. They line up and just,
Right.
hug along the creek line. And I thought, boy, there's a song in there about something lined in sycamore. And from that point on, it's like, okay, I write a line here, and then I'd wait a couple weeks and write another line. And it was a process. But yeah, it was just something that kind of came out driving the roads.
So when you share these ideas with him, then you go get an individual to come in and play a part?
No, I just do it.
Or just you guys?
Actually, I had Doug play mandolin on one song, a song called Girl Under the Moon that I wrote about my daughter, Allie. But basically what I'll do is I'll record one or two parts and maybe a vocal part. And he'll give me the hard disk, and I'll go home and I'll listen to it for about 4 or 5 days. And, maybe a week, I'll go back and say, this sounds really good, turn this down, wipe this out, and let's do this. And I keep adding to it like that. So with every addition of something new, I'm critiquing it and placing things and trying to work on timing. But like I said, I have this band that it has all these instruments. I've got a glockenspiel player and a keyboard player and a drummer and a bass player and a guitar player and a harmonica player, that several backup vocalists.
That are all in one cranium.
They're all right up here, man.
Right. So Frank, do you have a website or a Facebook page?
Hey, I've got frankjonesmusic.com. That is my website, and you can go there and listen to my last CD, Moonlight Eye. You can listen to Lined In Sycamore there. It's all original music that I have recorded on that page. But you can also go to any of the sites that you would find music. You can go to iTunes. You can go to Google Play, Amazon Music. You can go to Spotify. I'm on all those. You can just pick them up and
so
run
if
with
I want to
them.
buy your CD, I can just go to Amazon.
You can. Now, there's a way to purchase it on my website if you want to do that.
Which is probably better for you.
Well, yeah, I as I find out just today, even on Spotify, after I've sold so many, I start to get a residual. So it's not like I really put it out there to no avail. It's always good to get paid. It's always a good thing to, have that come back to you as your investment. But the thing that I really like about music today is that it can reach a lot of people. I have people that on my Frank Jones Music Facebook page from Kenya, and it's really cool. It's really gratifying to know that somebody likes, I don't know, Moonlight Eye or something,
Right.
some crazy song that I've done.
And they're sitting there looking at like lions and giraffes and listening to your music.
It's
right.
not Bean Blossom, man.
It's not.
And that's really the coolest thing for me is I like to spread it around as many people as I can.
Well, Frank, thank you so much for coming in and sharing a little story on this CD, and we're looking forward to hearing the music.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me in.
It's a great pleasure to talk with Bill Miller, who has a long life experience here in Brown County, and he's been sharing some of his information with us, and we want to continue this conversation. Earlier, you were discussing you have spent some time in Southeast Asia right around the time of the Vietnam War.
Yeah, well, I love Southeast Asia, and I love the Southeast Asian people. And growing up, you hear stories about religion, and you hear stories about people, and we don't treat them as though they were really like us. But believe me, the people in Southeast Asia and around the world are exactly like us. There's no such thing as collateral damage. It's like when somebody dies in these silly wars, it's like our grandparents or our sister or our brother, our mother, our father dying. It's not like collateral damage that doesn't count. And so hopefully in my book that came through. But while I was in Southeast Asia, working there with the people, I had a couple of occasions to run across some of our situations connected to Vietnam. I was in the hospital in the Philippines in 1964 and 65, and while I was there, the nurse said, there's some American boys up on the 5th floor, and they're from Vietnam. And this is 1964, right before the election between Barry Goldwater and Lyndon Johnson. And Lyndon Johnson was saying, let Asian boys die for Asia. I went up on the 5th floor, and there were 4 American boys, and they were shot up from Vietnam. And I was afraid that they were going to look at me in a negative way, being Peace Corps. But no, they were just like me, and they were happy to see an American. We had a good visit. But the point of it was, here it is, October 1964, when nobody here in America has heard of Vietnam, and we have boys shot up and dying in Southeast Asia, and our government's not telling us about it. But the other story that happened was while I was there, we were on vacation in northern Philippines, and I went outside at Baguio in the mountains of northern Philippines and looked up one evening, and I heard a roar, and it was B-52 bombers, like 50 of them, flying overhead, headed for Vietnam in the evening at night to pattern bomb North Vietnam. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that our government could be supporting pattern bombing people that were still living in huts like they were 1,000 years ago. And at the same time, they were promoting Peace Corps, which was helping people. It just didn't work out in my mind, and it made me feel so desperately bad that that was happening. And so that was another one of the items that I put in my book, and it made the National Peace Corps magazine here recently as people look back.
And the fact that you were actually there, I was a child growing up during that war, and even so, I remember seeing the television news where the napalm would just incinerate these huge areas, and just realize that there are children in there, and there are old people that have nothing to do with any kind of combat whatsoever. They're just being murdered.
Yeah, and when I visit the wall in Washington, D.C., and 58,000 Americans died, and some of them were my friends, and I feel so terrible about it, then I also stop and think that we killed at least 1 million North Vietnamese soldiers. We killed maybe 2 million to 3 million North Vietnamese and Vietnamese civilians. We killed maybe 1 million Cambodians in the name of what?
Right.
It was not peace.
And to what end?
And to what end? And then we eventually got out of there, thank heavens, but it literally tore up the country, and I think many of us are still tore up from that time as well.
Well, I've heard it said that if the memorial wall for the Vietnam War also had the names of the Southeast Asians who lost their lives, that it would run all the way to the Potomac.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. It's just so sad. And at that time, we didn't pay any attention to that. And the tragedy is that when we speak out like this, it makes us sound like we're anti-war. But I'm not anti-war. I'm all for protecting America, but nobody's attacking us.
Yeah.
And we keep doing this and doing this and doing this.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. And to those of us that love history, you see the pattern. I think there are wars that are clearly justifiable. World War II is a standout.
The Second World War, everybody was proud of that time. But then after that, we have not had a good war, the one that really where we were defending ourselves, and we still haven't.
So I'm very interested in your next book. What's the working title?
It's going to be Battle at Nebo Ridge, where we fought for 10 years to save our private property from being taken from us for a wilderness. We wanted not to oppose a wilderness, but ended up having to do that in order to get a compromise. And it turned out that I was proud to be a part of this final settlement and spoke at the dedication of the deemed wilderness in 1983, and was pleased that we have deemed wilderness today, but we did not want our property taken. Brown County's had so much property taken for public projects, and so it turned out it was good, but high price.
And the deem, as it eventually worked out, is a remarkable achievement. And I think anyone that loves the forest considers that to be something that we can all be proud of and something that we should be grateful for. Well, Bill, thank you so much for reminiscing with us and sharing your perspective. Always a pleasure to see you.
Yeah, well, this is my birthday interview because in 2 weeks I'll be 80.
Wow.
But it'll be a young 80 and an 80 with lots left to do.
Well, I'm looking forward to everything you accomplish from here on out, sir.
Yeah.
From the road that fords a creek to the pasture in the bottomland, deep-rooted in a soldier course is where the white trees stand. They're holding the sentry down the road and around the bend. They'll be there right as rain from the spring to the winter's end. Lined in sycamore, get the feeling I've been here before, in the cathedral of the tree. Lined in sycamore was the road to the Bellsville store, and on patches on our knees. Take the creek bed as it goes on a roll out across the land. They'll stand there on both sides where the water gives way to land. They're holding sentry down the road and around the bend. They'll be there right as rain from the spring to the winter's end. Lined in sycamore, get the feeling I've been here before, in the cathedral of the tree. Lined in sycamore, keeping time on the kitchen floor, with the help of a little breeze. In the cathedral of the tree. And on patches on our knees.
Now we pause for station identification.
You are listening to the Brown County Hour on volunteer-powered community radio, WFHB at 100.7 in Brown County, 91.3 and 98.1 in Bloomington, 106.3 at Ellettsville, and online at wfhb.org.
Segment 2 begins with Jeff Tryon's essay about the drug problem in Brown County. Jing Eagleman shares some information about spring seeds, and we'll listen to Frank Jones' tune, I Met a Girl.
This is My Brown County with Jeff Tryon. The more I thought about what really makes Brown County, the more I began to realize how we each have our own particular Brown County. In a way, Brown County is what we each bring to it, what we find there for our own, what we each make of it. No one else sees it probably in the same exact way that I do. That's what makes it my Brown County. You can't handle the truth. There was a touching article in the paper a few weeks back by the school superintendent. She is sick and tired of attending the funerals of young people who have died from drug overdoses. I guess for her, the ongoing regional and national opiate epidemic has been hitting pretty hard and particularly close to home. And it seemed like more of a cry for help than an idea of what to do. Her thesis was, we have got to do something. We don't know what it is, but we've got to do something about kids killing themselves with heroin and destroying their lives and their families with methamphetamines. But what? What are we going to do about it? More of the same thing that we've been doing for my entire adult life? The so-called war on drugs has been the biggest failure in history of government programs. Every year of the war on drugs for 40 years, the strength and availability of illicit drugs has increased and the cost has gone down. Even as the taxpayers poured endless billions into the fight, and we as a nation incarcerated more of our citizens than any other nation on earth by a wide margin. And it is time for the taxpayers to have a Dr. Phil moment. How is this working out for us? It's a good sign when civil servants and elected officials actually get their heads up out of the sand long enough to ask the beginning questions. But do they have the courage to stop doing the same things that have failed over and over and to rethink the problem and take a new approach? I doubt it, because we cling so tightly to our treasured notions. We tell ourselves the lies we want to hear, and we put on blinders to everything else. Plain fact is, we've grown accustomed to our lies. We can't handle the truth. We don't want to hear it, so we ignore it. The truth is, opium production in Afghanistan has increased every year since we have had a war going there, and it is now the longest running war in American history. Every year of our occupation of Afghanistan, opiate and heroin use has gone up in the United States. The truth is, the pharmaceutical companies and the physicians have been complicit in fueling this epidemic by a reckless promotion of OxyContin and other pharmaceutical opiates for profit. They made billions, but the mess they made will cost the taxpayer billions to clean up. The truth is, going after the individual user is a long-term strategy for failure. The amount of drugs involved in an epidemic of this proportion are not coming in stuffed in somebody's shoe or in the false bottom of a suitcase. It is coming in by the plane load and by the truckload, and it is coming in with the complicity, with the cooperation of people in high places or key positions. The truth is, the most damaging and costly drugs in our society by far are alcohol and tobacco, all perfectly legal, accepted, and advertised. Your actual gateway drugs are beer and cigarettes. Kids start sneaking a cigarette or getting hold of some beer, and only much later do they think about what other mind-altering substances they might like to try. The truth is that human beings take drugs. They have always and will always seek ways to alter their consciousness, and they don't necessarily care what their neighbors, the powers that be, or anybody else thinks about that. Our current plan here in Brown County is to give over one entire wing of our nearly empty state-of-the-art jail to a drug rehabilitation facility. This is a tacit admission that the main crime problem we have in Brown County is a drugs problem, or crimes fed by drug use. The plain fact is, this drug problem is not a law enforcement problem. It's more of a social, psychological problem. What we need is not more jail cells, but more rehab centers where we treat drug addiction for what it is, not a moral failing, but a medical issue. Last year or so, there was an article in the local paper about the growing heroin and opiate abuse problem, which focused on the case study of a young Brown County high school student who had gotten hooked on heroin. Then her parents sent her to a residential drug treatment program somewhere in California for, I think, 6 weeks or longer. It takes a while, it's a process. What they neatly failed to mention was the cost. Can you imagine what 6 weeks in an inpatient treatment facility costs? So parents and others are faced with a situation where they know their teenager is veering off course, but what can they really do about it? There are no treatment options available to them. We're faced with a situation where the well-off addicts go to an out-of-state rehab center to be treated for an illness, and their poorer classmates and fellow junkies go off to the jail, where we hope they will learn their lesson about breaking the law. But listen, it's not a law enforcement kind of thing. The sheriff and his department are not trained, equipped, or inclined to treat addiction disorders and mental illness. It's not that kind of thing. We have them for a totally different purpose. You have to choose to be healthy. You have to choose not to use drugs today. People who are incarcerated tend to go along with the program. They do really good until they get out, then they fall back into their old habits, and soon they are back in the custody of Brown County once again. At what point in that revolving door runaround do they get some kind of actual medical, psychological help? It's a mental wellness issue. It's a mental health issue, and we've got to deal with it with the tools that work for that kind of a problem. We have a real problem with mental health in this country. Under Reagan, the government closed the mental health hospitals, and most of those people ended up on the street and ultimately, predictably, in jail or prison. So we as a nation made a decision, in effect, to treat mental illness as a crime. It's an education issue, but the foundation of this educational outreach has to be honesty, because kids are well aware when they are being lied to. They know a double standard when they are experiencing it. One last truth you can't handle. It's the media, stupid. Kids do what they see on TV or the internet. Media is a lot more powerful and a lot more dangerous than anyone seems to understand. There's a book called The Plug-In Drug. It's about how people are actually physically addicted to the bandwidth they're receiving from their TVs and computer screens. You can put them on an EKG and watch physiological changes when they begin to fall under the spell of the one-eyed monster. But, like drugs, TV is here to stay. It is always with us. So maybe we had better think a little more carefully about how we use it and what we use it for, about what messages we are sending and who is receiving them. So the something that we have to do about these kids killing themselves with heroin is to change the way we think about and deal with these kinds of problems. We need to admit once and for all that the drugs issue is not a military or law enforcement type issue. And we need to root out corruption in the military and judiciary that looks the other way and takes money from drug lords and gangsters. We need to hold pharmaceutical companies and physicians accountable for their actions and change the way that whole system is operated. We need to understand that everyone shares the social cost of this drug epidemic. Whether they are rich or poor, it is undermining and destroying our culture and society. We need to understand that incarceration and militarization is much more expensive than appropriate public health programs, which have the side benefit of actually working. We need to make addiction recovery facilities and personnel widely available and cost-free. We need to understand and begin to teach everyone about mental wellness and how to maintain it and how to recognize and react to mental illness. But change is really, really hard. We do love our cherished notions, even when they're killing us.
I'm always amazed at the New Year's arrival of the spring wildflowers. They regularly appear right on schedule after the first few warm days of spring. Despite a prolonged chill or even snow squalls, they persist and continue their flowering. And it's all part of the plan. They continue growing. A plant's destiny is to produce more of its own kind through the production and germination of seeds. Flowering in general is a marvelous thing to observe when you consider ideal growing conditions may not happen. There have been springs we've all experienced here in Brown County with chilled days all through April, then a quick turn to almost hot days. No intermediate time of slow warming the soil. It seems to go from snowmelt to 80 plus degrees. Conversely, very warm days produce an explosion of blooms, only to be squelched by late April snow. These unpredictable conditions surely throw gardeners and flower growers a curve trying to predict and outsmart the weatherman. In Sunday's paper, an AP article from California stated wildflowers dormant for years now bloom across the West. These desert bloomers appear every decade or so, responding to spring rains, but now the blooming is even less frequent with so many droughts. But this spring, with almost too much rain, spectacular blooms appeared, and there are traffic jams in these usually arid places. So unusual are the appearance of these wildflowers, flower peepers, as the locals call them, arrive in tour groups from Japan and Hong Kong and other parts of the world. It's somewhat reminiscent of the fall color crowds we experience each October in Brown County State Park. Bottom line, people love to see plants. Wildflowers grow where they do, said a botany professor, though this didn't quite satisfy my limited appreciation. I assumed he meant that seeds fall in good and bad soil conditions. Those places with adequate moisture and warmth from the sun allow the seed to grow quickly from last year's production. Many wildflower seeds lay dormant for an entire year and require a freezing period to germinate. I once learned this by trying to germinate a plant and read that I was to put seeds in several different cold conditions. One in a moist paper towel and on a winter windowsill, some in the freezer, some uncovered in the fridge, and some placed in a pot covered with loose soil in the garage. This imitated the varied natural conditions, and I got some to produce little roots that I could plant. Other wildflowers begin growth from an underground rootstock. It's a storage organ called a tuber or corm, and it supplies the necessary nutrients to start the plant. Have you ever tried transplanting wildflowers from a natural area to your home garden? It's no easy task. What appears to be a hardy clump of wildflowers growing in the forest does not do well in a different environment, despite the care and maintenance. It's a paradox. Here's a plant that exists in its natural habitat through droughts, floods, and storms, but digging and moving it to bringing a bit of nature to your home landscaping scheme will not duplicate the conditions it must need, and it often results in disappointment. The old adage is true. Flowers are best leaving them where they grow. Leave them be for others to see. Ephemeral is a term often used with wildflowers. Their short-lived life requires the seeds grow into a mature plant quickly. And in the forested areas where we see spring beauties and hepatica, trilliums and toothworts, often this is far before the leaf canopy overhead becomes established. Sun-flecked areas warm up and the seeds do well here. Fallen leaf cover from last year helps the soil retain the needed moisture. Watch for bees and moths to visit these early ephemerals, and the predator squirrels, chipmunks, and birds that hunt them as a food source. This is often overlooked and an unassuming part of the plant world and has led scientists to develop a specific discipline. Plant ecology is the study of plants and their relation to the environment. This study has allowed more appreciation for how birds, animals, and mostly insects utilize plants. And the wildflowers at our feet, while pretty to look at, and out come the cell phones to capture pictures of them, are an important food source of nectar and pollen that we don't often realize. Less common or showy wildflowers are a challenge to find for many wildflower enthusiasts and photographers. Spring larkspur, wood betony, wild ginger, the yellow lady slipper orchid, the putty root orchid, and the early and diminutive harbinger of spring or salt and pepper are always on the lists. Hope you can get out and see these beauties this spring and others that are now flowering. It's a wonderful springtime here in the hills of Brown. Thanks for listening. This is Jim Eagleman reporting for another segment of Nature News, WFHB FM Radio, the Brown County Hour.
Riding my new wheels to town, ready to lay my daughter down. Then out of nowhere I met a girl. about these wheels I ride. Can only think about the feeling inside. 'Cause out of nowhere I met a girl. She don't love me. She's way above me. I believe she just don't know how much I care. And you know I care. Couldn't ask for a nicer day, just the kind I used to run away. My heart tells me it's time to stay. I met a girl. It's giving nickels to a penny man, too much to hold in my trembling hand. All in all, I'm a lucky man. I met a girl. She don't love me. She's way above me. I believe she just don't know how much I care. And you know I care. Can't forget the look in her eye. The look on my face was pure surprise. 'Cause out of nowhere I met a girl. I met a girl. No more sitting with the telephone. I met a girl. I'll never have to be alone. No more. No more.
Now we pause for station identification.
You are listening to the Brown County Hour on volunteer-powered community radio, WFHB, at 100.7 in Brown County, 91.3 and 98.1 in Bloomington, 106.3 in Ellettsville, and online at wfhb.org.
Our final segment begins with a conversation we had with Judy Olds about homeless teens in Brown County. Chuck Wills has a This Old Guitar story that he shares with Reverend Josh Peyton. Dave Seastrom has an essay about a recent off-road adventure, and we'll close the show with the Frank Jones tune, Frankenstein's Pockets.
It's my pleasure to introduce Judith Olds, who is here to talk about Youth Connections and the Safe Place program that she's part of.
Yes, I am, and I'm very happy to be here tonight.
Well, thanks so much for coming in. So,
You're very welcome.
Tell us what this program is about. Who do you serve and what do you do?
I'm here today to talk to you about our Safe Place Host Home program. We were asked last fall to come to Brown County and meet with a group of citizens who were concerned about the youth of the community. And a lot of the kids that we've found are runaway homeless youth. And people have a bad connotation when they think of a kid that's homeless. They think of somebody that's sleeping under a bridge or, down and out and so forth. That's not necessarily true. It could be a child that's couch surfing. staying at a friend's house, staying at an aunt's house, staying at a cousin's house, not necessarily if they're staying in the park. However, there are those that do sneak in the park and camp out and really have no place else to go. So that's why we're here. We have in Johnson and Morgan County, Youth Connections has 153 safe place sites. There are none in Brown County yet. We have just we have a memorandum of understanding with the schools. We have my program coordinator has been down here and has met with the principals of the schools. So we should have our first safe place site and sign up within the next couple of weeks. We're very excited.
Excellent.
So let me tell you a little bit about how it works.
All right.
You see the safe place sign, and you're a child or a youth, and you know that that's a place you can go and be safe. We then have someone come and meet that child, and we work with them. We find out what their problem is. I'm going to give you a few examples of some of the calls that we get. We've had the 17-year-old girl who was pregnant. Mom kicked her out of the house. She had no place to go. She went to a safe place location. They called us. We met with her. We went out. We picked her up. Found another relative that was willing to take her in until the baby was born. And happy ending for all involved. So a safe place site is not for kids that are in trouble. It could be something that a child just wants to talk to somebody else. They can text a number and they will reach somebody.
How can we reach you? So if you are a youth in Brown County, do you have a website, a Facebook page, a telephone number?
We have all those things.
All right.
And when we get down here, when we actually start full operations down here, we will have a liaison working with us. And so once a youth goes to a safe place location, they contact our office, and then we come down and we work with that child and get them whatever help that they need. We are trying to keep these kids in Brown County from going to DCS or going to juvenile. There are other sources available for the kids. Along with the Safe Place program, we need host homes. And those are homes that take these kids in for up to 21 days while we work with other agencies to get that situation resolved. We don't pay our host home families. We give them a stipend. But I'm very, very happy to let you all know that we do have one official host home family already signed up. They've gone through the background checks, fingerprint checks, and all of that. So we're very excited that we're this far ahead of the game. What we're finding is that the feds are trying to get away from the shelters for these kids and go more into a host home model.
Okay.
So that's why we're doing that.
Well, you're obviously looking for more host homes.
Yes,
how
we are.
How would you get involved in that if you were interested?
It's very easy. You can give us a call at the office, which is 317-738-3273, and ask for either myself, Judy, or Dawn. Either one of us can help you with that host home application and tell you a little bit more about the program. Keep in mind that they would only have a child for up to 21 days. We do a very careful screening, so we match the families very, very carefully. And also with our safe place sites, if a company or a business wants to become a safe place site, they also can call that number, and we can tell you exactly how to become a safe place site and have one of our beautiful yellow and black safe place signs on your business.
Do you have any connection at all with the Homeless Youth Coalition here in Brown County?
That is the group that reached out to us and asked us to come down here and start the Safe Place program. So we've been working closely with them, working with the Sheriff's Department, working with Brown County and the folks there. And so it was a whole team of those folks that came and asked us to come and do the Safe Place program. There is a huge population of homeless kids in Brown County. I know people don't want to admit that, but it is true. It's in every county.
Yeah. So you ever work with the Community Foundation?
The Community Foundation, God love them, they gave us a grant for $10,000 to start this program, and we're very, very fortunate to have that. We also received a $5,000 grant from the Smithville Foundation, so we're just a little bit shy of what we're going to have to do the program completely for a year. So if anybody wants to make a donation, they can give us a call on that too.
Well, this is excellent information. So again, what is your website?
Youthconnections.org. don't forget the S on the end, .org, and that's all one word, Youth Connections.
And similarly, your Facebook page?
Same.
Judy, it's been a real pleasure meeting you, and what important work you guys are doing.
Well, we're so excited to be in Brown County, and we know that the kids here are going to be able to work with us and have a safe place to go, and that we're pleased with.
This is Chuck Wills with This Old Guitar, and as many of you know, I'm a fan of old and unusual instruments, and out of my collection tonight, I have brought a 1950 Montgomery Ward airline guitar. What makes this special, in part on the headstock, is carved Rev Peyton and a corn cob. And also with me tonight is Rev Peyton. Welcome, Rev.
How's it going?
Great, great.
Yeah, this guitar is cool. It's neat to see this thing. I haven't seen it in a minute. It was mine, and I had a lot of good times with it. You want to tell them how you got it?
You had actually put it in an auction for Habitat for Humanity, and
right.
Luckily, I was the high bidder.
Cool.
And so it got to come home with me.
Well, I'll tell you the history of it. You know, myself and Breezy signed it, and I got it mainly. I started collecting a lot of. I call them the pawn shop guitars. You know, the ones from Sears and Montgomery Ward and whatnot. I started collecting them, and for a while I got too many of them. I had to start getting rid of some of them. And this was in that era when I'm like going, I've got to get rid of some of these. People, give me guitars a lot, and I have just a little tiny place, and I had to start getting rid of some of them. And as much as it pained me to get rid of this because I had such history with it, I felt like this one was a good candidate to put in the auction. They asked me if I had anything, and I thought this might be cool. And I'll tell you about the headstock on it. It has corn that has been wood burned into it and painted, and then my name at the top. And actually, my mom did that.
Wow.
My mom carved it and painted it. And it's because at the top, it didn't have anything. Like whatever was once there is gone. Okay. So I was like, Mom, maybe you could put my name up there. That might be cool, And one of the main reasons I got it was in 2009, I'm trying to think, we did this record called Peyton on Patent. Maybe it was 2010. I don't know. I have no idea. But we did this record called Peyton on Patent. And I wanted to tune my guitars like Charlie Patton did. And a lot of people think, that maybe he used capos because his guitars were tuned so taut, but they were not. It was not capoed. It was all done. He would just tighten them. And the reason he did that was in the old country blues tradition. When you're playing outside at like a train station or something, you had to be loud. And one good way to make a guitar really loud is to tune it really tight. It cuts through everything. So you don't have a lot of low end and bass, but you can hear it a long way off when it's tuned really taut. And it actually plays a little tighter and better for sliding stuff when you do it. The only problem is it's really bad on guitars. It's terrible on them. So I didn't want to do this to one of my old Nationals and risk folding the thing in half, because I actually tuned my guitars lower than Charlie did from my vocal range. So I didn't want to do that to something. So I set this thing up to play some of the Charlie Patton songs in certain tunings when I made that record, which was recorded with one microphone to analog tape. So when you listen to that, a lot of the times when I'm picking up and playing slide, I'm actually playing this right here. And I don't even remember where I got it, to be honest with you. I got it, probably, I'm always going to junk shops and thrift stores looking for guitars to play. I'm obsessed with it. It's a really bad obsession and addiction, but I guess it's better than heroin. A lot of artists are addicted to heroin. I'm addicted to guitars. So
I get it.
So yeah, it's good to touch this thing and see it. I remember when I was working with my mom at her kitchen table. My mom's a really good artist, and this is not super representative of work, but I want it to look real folk arty. I want it to look like folk arty. I have a couple paintings in my house, actually, my mom did, that look like they belong in a old world museum or something. So I got the music from my dad, but my dad's not an artist. He likes music, plays guitar, but he is not an artist. And my mom is an artist, but she is not musical in any way. And I think I kind of got the best of both. You kind of got to be both. So, but yeah, man, it's cool. I'm glad it went to a good home.
Well, it is well loved. It is definitely treasured at our house.
If you get hard up, maybe you could sell it and use this audio. Maybe it'll make an extra $5 or $6 on eBay or something for you.
Yeah, well, for that to happen, we'll have to be pretty hard up. That's definitely a keeper. So the 1950 Montgomery Ward airline with Rev Peyton. Rev, thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, play us out.
Yeah, let's just give a little bit of some of that Charlie stuff.
Yeah.
This is his spoonful. Let's see if I remember how it goes.
living in hill country, as wonderful as it is, can be challenging at times. This lifestyle teaches us that there are survival rules that can only be ignored at our own peril. One of them might be, never drive your RAV4 down the hill to the office when the ground is too soft to walk on. When I designed the layout for our house, I made sure that it was possible to drive to the lower level. This comes in handy for moving firewood or unloading groceries at the kitchen. For most of the year, the soil is dry and easily supports the weight of our vehicles. We can also drive this route when the ground is frozen. However, there is one condition that no amount of four-wheel drive will overcome, and that's when we've had a freeze-thaw cycle and the ground turns into snot. My wife, Becky, knows the rules, but she's a go-getter, and sometimes she stretches the limits of her car's ability to navigate in dicey conditions. While I was attending the Brown County Hour meeting last Tuesday night, she decided to drive her RAV4 down the muddy hill and load the old love seat from the office into the back of the car. Her plan went well until she tried to negotiate the return portion of the trip, which is uphill. She knew she was in trouble right away and came to a halt. She got in the other car and drove down to see neighbor Chris. There she played the damsel in distress card by asking him to pull her out of the mud with his tractor. Chris has a four-wheel drive Kubota and is often asked to help when a neighbor gets into trouble. Good-hearted man that he is, Chris followed her back to the ranch on his tractor, and after a bit of mud wrestling, he hooked up some log chains, and then the two of them began churning the muddy hillside in an attempt to free the vehicle. After a couple of minutes, it was obvious that Becky's car wasn't going anywhere, and they decided to stop for the night. After she covered a car seat and some blankets, because Chris was muddy from head to toe, she gave him a ride home, and they left his tractor in the field for the night. When I returned that evening, I asked Becky where her car was, and she sheepishly told me the story. There was nothing to be done about it until daylight, and we left it at that. The next morning, I consulted with neighbor Chris, and we agreed that the only solution was to hire a tow truck. When I consulted with my son, he recommended a local tow company, and he gave them a call. They often answer accident calls here in the county, and they've extracted vehicles from all kinds of precarious situations, and my son was confident they could help me out. About a half hour later, the driver showed up with their four-wheel drive tow truck, and we took a look at the situation. Fortunately, it was a straight shot, and he backed the truck into position and fed out about 100 yards of cable and attached the hook to the frame. His tow truck was located in the orchard, and as you might suspect, the ground was soft there as well. And even though the area is relatively flat, his tow truck tires churned the soil and ripped up the sod. With me in the driver's seat, the driver slowly winched the RAV4 up the torn-up hillside. When the cable pulled the car all the way to the wrecker, the driver would let out more cable, drive forward, and pull the car another several yards. After he repositioned the truck a few times, 20 minutes and $85 later, Becky's mud-covered RAV was sitting in the driveway, none the worse for wear. The ground in the orchard and the hillside next to the woodpile is as torn up as any of the worst logging sites I've ever seen. When Chris came to fetch his tractor after the tow truck driver left, he offered to come back when the conditions are right and smooth everything out. I suppose that a few months from now, after lots of smoothing out and untold applications of grass seed, you won't be able to tell this happened. The truth is, if you live here long enough, eventually you're going to get stuck in the mud. I've learned this lesson the hard way, and now it's Becky's turn. This is Dave Seastrom. See you next time.
Don't put your hands in the Frankenstein pocket. You don't know what's inside. Don't put your hands in the Frankenstein pockets. You don't know what's hiding inside. my Frankenstein. Don't put your hands in the Frankenstein pockets. You don't know what's in there. Don't put your hands in my Frankenstein pockets. Where it's been, you don't know where. About what's in there. Don't put your hands in the Frankenstein pockets. You don't know what's inside. Don't put your hands in my Frankenstein pockets. You don't know what's hiding inside. In my Frankenstein. In my Frankenstein. In my Frankenstein.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 72 of the Brown County Hour, recorded in our studio at the History Center here in downtown Nashville, and brought to you the first Sunday of every month at 9 a.m. and the following Wednesday at 6 p.m.
The Brown County Hour is brought to you by a diverse group of folks who believe now more than ever, the world is for everyone.
This show was produced by
Chuck Wills,
Pam Rader,
Rick Fettig,
Vera Grubbs,
Carrie Ray.
and Dave Seastrom. We would also like to thank Slats Klug for our theme music. You have been listening to the Brown County Hour.
coming to you from deep in the woods of Brown County, Indiana.
celebrating the arts, culture, and nature that make this such a unique community.
Visit us online at browncountyhour.com.
The Brown County Hour is a production of WFHB.
Volunteer-powered, listener-supported community radio for South Central Indiana.
Take me back to my old Brown County home.